Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and today I am being joined by Uche and Ravi from the Docker team.
What's up,
Hey, y'all.
you guys?
So, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're going to be talking about the Visual Studio container tools that runs on Docker.
Exciting. So, before we dive in, what is a Docker container? Why should I use it? Why should I care?
That's a good question. Whenever I'm talking to my friends about it, I always say, especially my non-software friends, I say, you know how when you first get a phone and that phone has way too many apps on it, and you're like kind of annoyed because maybe your phone might start off running kind of slow. Um, well, a container is basically as if you were to, because your phone runs apps, right? So a container is basically a way for you to get a sort of clean phone to be able to run your applications on, so that when your application pops in, the only thing that exists on your phone is exactly what's needed to run the application. So a container is just when you shift that over to an actual PC. A container is a small piece of a small piece of a computer that understands how to, say, first download a Linux machine with nothing on it, and then download the dependencies for, say, Python, and then your application that comes next. And all of a sudden, it's a very clean, small chunk of memory rather than a massive machine that has everything that's downloaded on it and everything that bloats it and makes it slower. So containers allows for developer agility. It also allows you for a reproducible environment. So that way, you know that, oh no, I didn't accidentally drag and drop my file somewhere different today, or my friend messed me up somehow. It's a Docker file especially gives you a list of simple instructions that get run in order, including getting the base level image first, and then some things downloaded next, and then your app last, so that it's always in that exact same order. You know exactly where to expect everything to be. And now it gets you closer to a near production environment that can be used, so that when you get into the production realm, you know that any of the, say, environment variables that you needed to be configured precisely a certain way is configured that way when you do it in your container. So when you get to a cloud environment and you're using secrets in some sort of remote environment, those same secrets carry over. It's expecting config equals 10. And so when you get into the cloud realm, whenever you put in config equals 10, it was doing the exact same thing back in the container world. And your containers, of course, can be deployed as images to your cloud, to your cloud of choice as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so you two specifically work on Docker as it relates to Visual Studio, right? So, what are some of the challenges that developers tend to face when they're setting up their Docker projects or their Docker containers? And how can Visual Studio help fix some of those problems?
That's an amazing question. So I don't know about you, but the hardest thing on earth at times is to get set up to finally hit that nice F5 or um, play button, so to speak, to run your application, and everything breaks or something isn't downloaded and you have all these different issues. So it's usually the setup and configuration that is the hardest thing. And also, when you have a existing application, especially like an existing .NET application, which is what the Visual Studio container tools really does very well, a lot of people have a lot of trouble getting that workload onto an actual container. They're stuck figuring out how to configure it. They're stuck figuring out how to write a raw Docker file so that it can load everything. And that just takes time. Where why take that time when you can spend more of that time enjoying what containers have to offer, including that sort of developer agility, environment variables, awesome container asset management that our container tools window gives you. So what things that we've done is we've made scaffolding very easy. We make it so that when you make a new .NET web application, you can actually immediately click enable Docker support. And I will show you that as we go into our demo. Also, if you have an existing .NET application, you can simply right click on the project, go to the menu item of add, and you can literally say add Docker support. And what that does is it gives you a Docker file that knows how to take in your entire your application. It takes in your application and it knows how to make a Docker file so that you can immediately hit F5. Like it's so much easier. So even someone like me who may not be crisp and clean at writing Docker files from scratch can get started with a existing .NET application and be running in a container.
Yeah, just like to add, like Visual Studio offers some optimization of debugging, so user don't have to like spin up the new container every time they want to make changes to the code and start the debugging. So we do a lot of optimization. It will be very snappy to like just edit the code and debug.
Exactly.
Awesome. So would y'all like to dive in? Although I should point out, hi chat, welcome. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have. Uche and Ravi are here to help answer them about Docker containers and how to set them up, how to use them in Visual Studio. They're total pros at this and are happy to help answer your questions. So ask away. Anyway, shall I toss the reins to you, Uche?
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, thank you. And feel free, chat, say whatever you need to say and ask whatever you need to ask. Ravi's going to be especially answering any technical related questions. So please make sure to ask whatever it comes to mind. And I'll be demoing some of our functionality today. So get ready. It begins now. All right. So feel free to share my screen. Awesome. So now I'm just on a regular computer. Usually people would run their applications locally, but I'll show you what happens when you can run stuff in a container. And so I'm going to just start off Visual Studio. I happen to use the preview version because I like to keep up with the very latest features of Visual Studio. Sometimes it's a great decision. Sometimes you got to watch out. But yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project and show off what this looks like. So I'm going to create a new project, and what's common is to create an ASP.NET Core web app. So I'm going to do that because I'm going to just make like a little website real quick. So let's name this. I like to demo. If you get that reference, you're pretty cool. So next, we can see that we have the ability to enable Docker. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Docker OS of Linux and the framework of .NET 6.0 because this has long-term support and it'll be around for a while. One thing I do want to mention, actually, forgot real quick, is we do have function support for Docker. So if you go to functions and you hit next, then we actually have the ability for you to click enable Docker. This is a feature that's available if you go to Tools, Option, and then select new functions startup project or something of the sort. You'll see the setting. But for now today, we're going to go ahead and just go back to our web app and start. So I like to demo. Okay, so next is we're going to go next. We're going to enable Docker so that we don't have to right click on the project, say add, and then Docker support, saves us a step, and then click create.
I think chat gets it, by the way.
Yeah, thank goodness. Thank goodness. I thought I was alone in this world. Oh.
Right? I'm always like that. It's like, oh man, I want to throw in this joke here for my demo, but I don't know if anyone's going to get it except for my weird self. So.
Yeah. I don't have many friends, so this is the risk I'm taking. Yeah. All right. So now you see that we got pulled up to ASP.NET Core Docker. We have this new blade right here called Developer with Containers that'll take you right to the container tools documentation, which is awesome. We have some really awesome doc writers that have helped so much over the years because I know that writing docs is difficult. So now let's look at what we can do. All right, so now we're in our application. That was a hard word. And I'll just briefly explain the Docker file real quick. So our Docker file, we have a multi-stage Docker file. at times this can be relatively confusing, but it's because we want to sort of optimize that build process depending on what you're doing. So if you're trying to debug, then we're going to actually add the VSDBG, the VS debugger, into your container so that it can actually hit breakpoints. And if you're not really trying to do that, you're trying to just make a release, then you'll see that it has something like build as published. So this is a different work stream where it's not going to expect you to debug. Generally, I stick with debug because it's what I like to use so I can hit breakpoints, make sure that everything I'm doing is correct, and then move on to the next step. So we have a few other things. Yeah, and so I'll also show off, sorry, that was a random pop-up. So briefly show and explain the compose file. Let me X this off. So we don't have a compose file yet, but I'll go into that. Is there any questions so far?
Yeah, we do have a couple questions. So first up is we're talking about debugging a Docker file, or is that what we're going to be talking about?
Are we going to be talking about what exactly? I'm sorry.
Debugging a Docker file.
So what we're actually going to do is we can hit. So we won't be talking about debugging a Docker file per se. We'll mainly be talking about just running an application. So the Docker file is less of a point. It's just showing you that this is what was built for you, so you didn't have to do it yourself. And you'll be able to now hit F5 and get going immediately, which is like the time saver here. I don't know about you, but I'm not so good at typing this out from scratch. So it's great to have the functionality of when you just have that right click, add Docker support, you now have the ability to hit F5 and run your container.
Awesome.
So we see our solution container. I like to demo. And what it's doing is it's obviously building this application, going, and I'll show you what this looks like. I like to demo. So we're seeing, now we get to see everything, which is awesome. This includes debugging support. So we can go to pages, index, and this index is calling an onGet method. Let me make sure it's in here. Hello? Okay, nope. And so if I hit refresh, bang, it hit a breakpoint. So that's just really quick to show that there's debugging support in your single Docker project. But let's take it a step further and actually go ahead and go to the compose level. So I want to show off some of our compose features, and that'll basically wrap in the rest of our entire presentation here, because once you get to compose, it's basically just a layering of single containers. And it allows you to run all the containers in the same Docker network so they can sort of talk to each other the same way they'll eventually talk to each other in a more production level environment. This is why Compose has caught fire in the software world, because it allows you to layer together microservices, or AKA multiple connected services in an application. So you can talk to, say, you can use your web application to talk to a database, or you can use it to talk to a cache, which talks to a database, and you can flip it up and upside down, left and right, any way you want. But it's amazing because now they're in the same Docker network, and you can configure it very similarly to the way you'll configure it in an actual production environment. So this helps take so much of the guesswork out of your hands and put it onto the page here. So if we don't have any questions, I'm actually going to jump over to our Compose project.
Oh, do have a couple more questions on the Compose
Awesome.
side. Is that feature new?
Compose. So no, it's not. So let me go ahead and run over to the Compose project, and I'll talk a little bit about it. So now I'm going to open up Visual Studio. Once again, I just find this easier because I'm about to jump over to a different project. So this is going to open up something called my demo app, which is going to include at least a few. It's going to include at least a few services, so we can actually get an understanding of what's going on. So the Compose feature, as this is loading, the Compose feature is not new, actually. It's been around for quite a while. And the Compose feature, so I'll go in and open up our Compose file. People find it relative, like you know, I find it a little bit easier to read than a Docker file. And it's because it's basically piecing together your services. Um, the compose feature, what it does is you'll see I have a demo app and a Redis cache and a database that are all going to be working together to make it so that my application can can run, and it'll be able to keep the state of how many times I have refreshed my page in a certain counter value. Um, and so this compose feature, it's been around. There's a few extra features that have been around that we won't talk about today, such as Docker profiles. But those are things you can definitely look up, and it's a little bit out of the context of the current presentation. But you can see here with demo app, I'm able to say, okay, run this image called this based on this demo app Docker file, which is right here. And then for Redis isn't going to be built off of a Docker file. Instead, it's going to be actually an image pulled from Docker Hub comes from the Redis repository of images. And so when you pull Redis latest, this pulls what it's a known name in Docker Hub. I hope I'm correct that it'll be Docker Hub, but yes, it'll be pulling a known name Redis, and it'll be pulling the latest version of that image so that it can basically run in my application. Again, an image is just basically, it boils down to a Docker file, and a Docker file, again, is just a list of instructions that helps build what becomes an image. And a container is just a running image, an image that you press run on. It becomes a container. So then you can see here with database, we have something that actually comes from MCR, the Microsoft Container Registry. And it also is another image that if you actually go over to the website where this lives, it'll ultimately be a Docker file that has a bunch of instructions. But instead of me actually having to download each Docker file onto my machine and then call it MS SQL or call it Redis, I get to just pull it from a different website that already built will know how to grab the Docker file and make it so that I can build this image right here. So I hope that's clear, but that's basically how Compose is working together. The network is managed by the actual Docker engine. And when you talk to it, there'll be different ways that demo app will talk to Redis, like it does as an HTTP endpoint. Yeah. So I have a few things I want to touch on when it comes to Compose. Firstly, we are actually working to make a sample like this. It'll be a sample available for you all. It should be available if you go to Visual Studio Container Tools documentation under tutorials in the next, I can't promise a timeline, but in the next not too long, there should be an actual project that you can use that'll look very similar to the one I'm going to be displaying today. So you can all get your hands dirty and have fun with Compose. We'll obviously clean up some of the things I have. So going into the index, which is the simplest place, I want to first start off by hitting F5, and then we'll get into some of the awesome things that our tooling gives you. Okay, so I'm going to hit F5, which is going to build those 3 services that you saw, the app, the Redis, and the database, Redis cache and the database. So if I hit F5, or for my case, I'm going to just press play so you can see it visually. Some people say press, click run, but I like to say press play. I don't know.
I like that too, honestly.
So what we can see is that the actual output shows us what's going on, which a lot of developers clamored for, asked, and they really needed it when we didn't have it very initially a while ago. People, please, what is going on? What's happening? So you get to see the whole output here. You can see it's actually telling you creating Redis, creating database, creating the web app, and what it's doing in the background is really just running those images. And if the image isn't already existing, in the case of Redis and DB, it's first building the Docker file, and then that creates an image that it then runs. So now you can see that we have a database, demo app, and Redis, and lo and behold, we have our local host, which is, boom, our demo app. So we have Compose, What's going on though? I think things will start to click over time as we layer what's going on. So I'm going to click demo app, demo app, demo app, demo app. What's happening is this is actually getting placed in our cache and we're updating the number. So that way, if I were to get rid of this X off, and you'll see that we automatically stop, then if I were to run it again, we should expect for our cache to keep the same value.
Awesome. So that Docker container window, that's a newish addition, isn't it? I feel like it popped up in like the late life cycle of 2019 Visual Studio.
Yes. So I'll start off by getting us. Yeah. So I'm not sure of exactly the history. It's been here since I've been around for about 3 full years. So I maybe it, but we've been trying to take many steps to actually improve the discoverability of the containers tool window. We have learned that some folks that we actually talked to someone recently, maybe a few months ago, who we told them, oh, and as you can see, boom, we have the number was captured, which is awesome. And it plus one because we jumped back in once again. So it went from 4 to 5. But anyway, we talked to someone who said, yeah, man, I just wish that there was more things that would help me tooling wise in Visual Studio for containers. And we said, but there is. And then this person said, no, there's literally not. And then we were like, oh God. We said, okay, go to view. Yeah, go to view. So if you are in Visual Studio and you go to view and then other windows and then containers, click that. That'll actually bring you to the containers tool window. This person then said, hey, I'm gonna be real with you. I don't think I've ever hovered over other windows.
I
I
don't
clicked
think I
on
have
view.
either. What? Yeah. If it's
And
not in
so
that
it's
first window, it's like a lost cause.
exactly. So for everyone on this chat right now, I want to say we're introducing a new keyboard shortcut that could make your life a lot easier. And I think I'm so happy that we finally have a keyboard shortcut because it's what I use now every single time I open up the containers window.
Awesome.
Sometimes when you hit F5, it will pop up the containers window. But in the case that you just want to manage your containers, manage your images, it's nice to just have a quick shortcut. So if I X this off, I'm going to hit Control KO, and boom, container tool window pops up right in center. Control KO. So now we see this. So I'm going to walk through what just happened. We have this Redis message that's happening. As you can see, number is getting incremented. We're able to, and I've already shown it in single, so I won't show it again for this. Just trust me that if I were to set a breakpoint here, it'll hit this breakpoint. And so there's also the case where when it comes to the container tools window, it helps you in a lot of different ways. So we'll first start off with images since they're a little bit simpler. And as we see, we have the like web API, or sorry, demo app dev. We have our I like to demo dev container, which you remember what that's one. That one was just created previously. Demo app is just created, and it also gives you some details, what's going on, so you can see what you can see the deeper level information about the images, especially if something goes wrong. It's really nice to have a nice details blade. So if we can actually right click on any of these images, and these are some of the interactions that are there. You can tag an image. So if I want to tag this image, I want to say, okay, I don't want to call it demo dev. I want to call it demo the sky is blue, because that's how I feel right now. Talking to all of y'all is now I have a tagged image, and I can go ahead and control and click through them all, so I can actually run them all at the same time if I feel like doing that, or if I want to remove them all, which is also a really great use case. This also supports if I were to click and hit shift and then click, it just highlights them all. So we now have multi-select for containers, saves you some time, and you see you obviously can't tag all containers at the same time, even though I really wish I could tag all the containers that the sky is blue for all of you. Anyway, but you can delete them all, or you can run them all. Like, so you can there's a few interactions that go across all of them, so you can interact with them as such. And that's the same way that happens over in container world. Control, or in the case of shift. You'll see that you have interactions that span across. You also have the ability to, for a demo app, you can see all of these really helpful blades, things that we've added over the years as customers have really enjoyed the different aspects of how to manage the actual assets of the containers. A lesser known feature that I definitely want to mention is two things: logs. So you can see my active containers logs. And as I like refresh, you actually see the logs occur. And so if I hit run and I start refreshing, you'll see that. Or if you want to go into volumes, you can now actually see book clubs. You can actually see the different volumes and the type of volume. So you're bind mount to them, and it's awesome. So you can actually see, okay, the destination is in my whack app folder or /app folder. So I can actually click on that, and now it's loading, and it jumps me over to the Files tab. So in the Files tab, you see we've now expanded the app folder, and I can literally interact, open and download. And we're soon adding the feature of upload, which is going to be awesome. So you can upload a actual file into your container if you need it for how does my container react to file uploads or something of the sort, those scenarios. You have the ability. So it's really, really a smooth process where we want to implore you to really check out the Files tab, especially, and volumes is a really great way to get you there to know exactly, okay, I expect this folder to link to this folder. Let's make sure everything is correct. I'm going to interact with that folder in my container by doing different commands. Really helps you. You also get to see the ports that are happening, the labels of the whole entire container and everything that wraps in, as well as the environment variables, just so you can always make sure that your .env files or environment files are getting thrown in exactly how you expect, and nothing is awry. Awesome. So, are there any questions right there? I know that was a lot, but I'm just trying to show off what the Container Tools window gives you, and it gives you such a great ability to run images, run containers, delete things, and see what's going on inside images and containers. So, I implore you, hitting Control KO, you're not going to be mad about it. It's going to be a great experience, especially after you right-click on your project, go to Add. Waiting for the hover to work. Hello. Sorry, my computer's freezing. It's running a lot. And then Docker support. That'll be how you do it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I do want to say not too many questions, but a lot of positive responses towards having this window, with the most impressive for some folks being that you managed to find a free keyboard shortcut for the container window. So that is pretty impressive. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, when I say it took me about 10 years, it felt like, to find a suitable keyboard shortcut that wasn't taken by the amazingly storied different parts of Visual Studio. I did some work on that. But yes, I really appreciate the positive feedback and positive responses at all, because, I'm a program manager. I come up with I take in a lot of user feedback and come up with some of the ways we're going to do it. But developers like Ravi and a few other developers that aren't on the call, they make this possible, and they really, really bring all of these ideas to life. And it's really awesome whenever it helps out anyone. That's the whole point of creating developer tooling. So yeah, I really loved that any of you see value and you remember that Control KO so that you can easily get over to the Container Tools window and start reaping the benefits. There's a few more things. I want to go into a more advanced scenario real quick. And so what do I do if I'm in a case of, we have various customers that said, oh, my microservices, I run 15 containers at all the same time. But sometimes I want to run 5 out of the 15. Sometimes I want to run 10 out of the 15. And then we're looking at them like, oh my God. And so back in the day, they said they would make multiple different Docker Compose files with all these different combinations of the services they're going to run, or they would take a long Compose file and comment out certain services. And we said, that just sounds so painful. So I want to introduce you to the subset of Compose services feature. The way you can do this, way you can get to this, and we'll look at the Docker Compose file for reference. So notice that it has demo app, Redis, and database. So if you right click on the project and you go to Uche, where am I? Sorry. Well, if you do this, manage Docker Compose launch settings, manage, maybe is it in this one? Yeah, sorry.
Would it
Thank
show
you.
up if we just use like Control Q? Because I never remember where anything is, so I just use the global
Oh,
search.
that's so clean. Yeah, actually, Control Q, manage Docker Compose. Oh, maybe it's not in that.
Oh man.
Darn. But if you right click on the Docker Compose project and you click Manage Docker Compose Launch Settings, or my favorite way is if you are in this menu, if you see this menu right here and you right click on the little tab beside, you can actually click Manage Docker Compose Launch Settings, and you can see right now I already have a few other options, no Redis, but I'm going to open it up just to show you. So what this does is it basically sifts through your Docker Compose file really smart, really intelligently. And by the way, make sure I put props on Ravi's name. He created this feature, which is not easy. But yeah, he helped actually truly make this feature come to life. But we
Thanks,
see
Robbie.
this. Thank you, Ravi. Seriously, we've seen a large increase in customers using this feature since it's become available and since it's become more and more observable, findable. So if you see what's going on, I have my Docker Compose launch profile, DB, demo, app, Redis. Notice that we have no options to start with debugging for DB or Redis because these are not a .NET project. But when we do detect that it's a .NET project, you get a start debugging option. We then have like a launch service name, demo app. So you can launch the demo app. And then you can have a launch action, which I generally say to launch browser rather than do nothing. That way you can see it actually come up and come to life. We already were running Docker Compose though. So let's look at what is it if we were to say create a new profile. If I click new, then I can set a profile name called no Redis. And instead of, and you notice like, hey, sorry, that already exists. Instead of actually doing so, I'm going to hit cancel, and it would be equivalent to me. What would happen is, let me just do it for demo. No, Redis, demo. If I hit OK, you see all of this. Start. It's the same exact thing as the compose in the first place. But now let's just say, do not start Redis. Okay. And I want you to still launch our demo app, launch browser, and good to go. Hit save. So this will be using our launch profile, no Redis demo. So click OK, and we see it switches to no Redis demo.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, I want you to understand, I'm going to delete these containers because this Redis container is still running in our Docker network. So if I were to run this no Redis demo, it wouldn't run without Redis. Redis still already got built and it's still running. So that's just something interesting to keep in mind, that containers don't die. They live forever until you remove them.
So
or
beautiful.
your computer crashes.
Yeah, right. Not so beautiful.
Not so beautiful. So now that I created this launch profile, I'm going to hit F5 and let's see what goes on. So remember, our application was relying on Redis cache, which is then sending data to our database. It was relying on Redis cache to get a counter value. So now let's look what happens if I build this, and let me go over to my containers window. It's slowly building and it's creating all of this, it's downloading exactly what it needs. It's doing exactly what it has to do with this to give you the slimmest version of your computer, of a container computer that it takes to run an application. And you'll notice that only database and demo app were built. Right now, my browser is currently launching, so I'll pull it over when that happens.
Also, while that's happening,
for sure.
got a couple questions in chat about this. Are all these features working in Visual Studio Code too? Or are there like equivalents in VS Code?
Absolutely. So virtually all of these features do work. Now this manage compose launch settings feature, that feature is it's halted right now as this gets built. But we
Oh,
see Redis isn't available at the moment.
sad.
Please leave a message at the beep. Beep. So yes, so you see this is the case where if I hit this, it's just it doesn't have Redis. It's like I don't know,
No counting.
no counting. I can't count. Sorry. So if we go back, when it comes to VS Code, the Docker extension for VS Code, all these features are available. And so I X'd it off so you see that it went away. However, the Manage Docker Compose Launch Settings feature is this is mainly available in this actual visual UI is in Visual Studio, but in VS Code, UI isn't as centric because it's more of a text editor. So we still have a similar feature that allows you to click checkboxes for which of the containers you want to start. And then has like launch JSON and various things so you can actually attach, your debugger to a specific solution of your choice if that gets run. However, we don't have this actual UI. But yes, pretty much every feature you see is available in VS Code as well. And there are a few more, including these are volumes that are on the container, but we actually do track in VS Code like stuff like volumes that are on the overall PC that have nothing to do with containers and a few other features as well. It's a great question. Awesome. So I want to stress again that subset of compose feature, man, since we've introduced it, it's been at least about one third of the way that people even run their Docker Compose is using these different subsets. So it just shows the power of flexibility. Not only one thing to very, very much mention is now, especially if I'm trying to run just a couple of my things and I have this big, heavy image, I'm able to make changes and hit F5 and it'll run a lot faster than if I have to start up my Redis image every time. Instead, I'm only starting up just that lightweight front end code. So just keep in mind things like that. Use it how you want. I know that I think of developers as artists even because they just have so much creativity in the ways they choose to use the tools we give them. So this is just a way to paint the way you want to. Lastly, what I want to go over is publish. So I have these images, but I want to actually get them. So I'm running that again. I don't know if that was that's a pretty good decision always to run, but I don't know why I did that. So I'm going to hit cancel. Goodbye. So I want to go over publishing. So if I go to containers and I go to images, we have the ability to run interactive, tag, and remove. But for the case of Visual Studio, you actually can right-click on your overall project solution. And if you go to publish, you have various things you can do here. So shout out to my fellow former PM, Mike Morton. He would love this part of the demo.
I think he's still working in the YouTube chat anyway.
Yeah. And I saw him in the chat. That's why I'm poking fun at him. I worked with Mike for many years, and I really do appreciate all of the time that he helped coach me up as a PM. So we have this ability to publish. So you see, I've kind of already done it once. So I'm just going to hit new so that we can see this flow. And you're actually going to be able to publish your demo app image to the repository of your choice. This is important because you can imagine that I take my compose file one day, and I'll go back real quick. And instead of even having Dockerfile, I could just do the same thing. I could have Uche's registry.demoapp:/latest. And now I don't even need a Dockerfile. I pull my image, and for whatever way I need it, I just have my image. So this is just a clean way to sometimes get your publish, but also you can do it by publishing to an ACR, Azure Container Registry, or even better yet, skip a step and publish to an Azure Container app, which is going to take that image and actually run it. So if I say publish your application to Azure, so if you say, you see Docker Container Registry, that'll publish the image to a container registry. Mm-hmm. Or in the case of Azure, you can publish it to the Azure Container Registry as well. which image, it's now in a nice hub that you own. You can pull it down whenever you want, wherever you want, and any CI/CD pipeline, like wherever you want to do it, whatever you want to do with it.
Awesome.
And you can also publish this image or this existing application, and it'll create an image for it and publish it into a software as a service called Azure App Service, or even I really like the Azure Container Apps. It's in preview, but it'll soon be GA.
On the repo side, speaking of which,
sure.
Can you publish to private repos?
Can you publish an image to a private repository? That's a good question. Ravi, do you know?
Check the chat for the answer.
That's a good question. So you can see I have like a few random things. I have like a target. Let me go back. I'm not sure. I don't want to misspeak. I do know that you can, when you say like to a repository, you mean literally to a GitHub repository?
I'm assuming that's what was meant.
Because I know you can publish it to a registry where the image lives.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the meantime, as Ravi / my friends help me out with that, I love the tough questions, I'm going to go ahead and click on Azure Container Apps Preview. It's going to ask my resource group. I have no instances available, so I can create a new instance. You create that new instance, you click on it, you hit next, and bada boom, bada boom. I won't go all the way through the flow since I don't want to actually create this resource, but you'll ultimately see you'll actually be able to publish your image to an Azure Container App, where then you actually will get a real link that you can click and have that link available live. From there, that you can interact with it on a real website. You can actually go to the Azure portal and see this existing resource. You can interact with it. You can see its web traffic, and you go from there. And of course, you can then add on to it by adding different elements, such as having that container app call out to different images, such as your production level Redis cache, so on and so forth, and the magic goes from there. But this stuff helps you save so much time, because you're now taking something that works. You hit F5, it works. You publish it to Azure Container Apps, it works. That's our promise, at least. It works, it's there, and now you can start adding to it from there, rather than figuring out, oh crap, how do I make an Azure Container App? It's all here for you. So this pretty much concludes most of the features I wanted to show you. And that spanned all the way from that project new scenario where you make your own .NET Core 6.0 web app. You have running and debugging support with that. We looked over the Docker Compose aspect, which again was the microservice application architecture, so that you can see how all these apps running the same network are able to interact with each other beautifully. And lastly, we showed off our amazing Control-KO containers tool window that allows you to interact with images, see the labels and details of images, see all these awesome, important, different aspects of your running container, including the logs. And lastly, publishing that working demo app.NET project into an actual runnable place, such as either not a runnable place, but you can publish it into a hub, such as the Docker Hub or the Microsoft Container Registry, or you can publish it so it's running immediately, which is I really love. That's my favorite way to do it. Publish it to Azure Container Apps, or of course, the Azure App Service is also available. So I hope this has been very helpful. I hope that it spurred a little bit of curiosity and enjoyment of our knowledge in our tool set, and you can see yourself actually using it. I also want to do a shameless plug to say, please give us as much feedback as you possibly can. Almost all of these features we've created in the last, I don't know how many years, has been because of direct direct contact with y'all as developers, and different ideas pitched, different problems you mentioned, like maybe you don't even have a solution, just say this doesn't work, or this is a problem, or this is happening. And we take it so seriously and try our best to find a creative and awesome way that works for you and works for the rest of our customer set. So thank you so much for all of your influence over the years, and I look forward to what's next.
Yeah, and I mean, you already got one suggestion already about the private Docker repository publishing support. I'd say it would be a good feature in the future for enterprise, especially. So you already
Yeah,
got one.
awesome.
And yeah,
That's
definitely go.
amazing.
Yep. And then also there's the developer community and your Twitter handle. So yeah, definitely reach out there. We do have a question. Do you have a link to a quick start doc to help folks get started with an existing GitHub repo containing a compose file?
We are so close to that. We are so close to that. And I know that Robbie is smiling somewhere because he's just he's just put together a working compose project that's we are going to actually paste on a public GitHub repository. In the meantime, I will throw in this link and you can paste it.
Oh, is it the AKA the AKA one that you sent earlier?
It's slightly different. That'll take you close to it, but it's the container multi-container tutorial. And so that tutorial is going to eventually have this a GitHub link that you can pull, and it'll show you how you can actually take advantage of an awesome new feature in GitHub where you can actually open up a GitHub repository and just click on a button that says open in Visual Studio, and it'll literally just git clone, pull your entire project into Visual Studio as it opens, and then you're ready to run, you're ready to rock. So we're so close, and it'll have an existing example with a Docker Compose file that'll allow you to sort of look at it. As you can see, I've commented out some Docker profiles, which is another feature that's a little bit higher level, a little bit more advanced for some folks that want to use that.
Awesome. And I also want to plug your other link that you did share earlier with me when we were off live, the aka.ms/Visual Studio-Docker site. Where does that go?
Yes, aka.ms/Visual Studio-Docker. It goes to our actual front page. And so our front page of our docs, we have done a lot of revamping, and I've really appreciated my boy Gordon, who just continues to churn out awesome docs. Whenever I type a doc, it has about 23 typos, and everyone's asking, bro, why did you put this here? And I'm like, I don't know.
So, but then that was deliberate.
Exactly. But when he types it, it comes out a lot better. I'm glad I haven't been fired. So as you saw, it goes to our front page of container tools, and this is where you can dive in. I really implore you, just dive in, start off with a couple quick starts, look at some of our how-to articles, and by the time you're through it, you'll really have a good feel of at least how to start up your ASP.NET web application and various other tools you can use to really be a successful .NET developer in Visual Studio. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, though, in VS Code, we have support for other main languages. We have first-party support for three languages, that being .NET, .NET, Python, and Uche is blanking on the third one. .NET, Python, debug support.
I mean,
yeah,
JavaScript, TypeScript.
No. .NET.
No.
Yeah, my boy Mike is so mad at me right now. I know he's mad at me. I've been in Visual Studio land for so long. But yes, so VS Code. So if you also go to, if I type in VS Code Node, thank you, Mike. Oh. He saved me. He's like, Uche, you're messing this up. No. Uche, you don't know. You're the worst PM ever. Yes, so we have .NET, Python, and Node support, which is amazing. So if you type in the Docker extension for VS Code, this is also the website you can go, and you can dive in. So we have ASP.NET, Python Node, debugging, and so much other things you can do. So in case you have needs for other languages, this is a great place to start. And I say if you really want a really comprehensive .NET debugging experience and .NET support, it'd be really great to check out Visual Studio Container Tools. So yeah, someone
All
said I
right.
like to note it.
Yeah. Full circle. Well, yeah, as we wrap up, what is the future for Docker container support in Visual Studio? Somebody also asked, like, really early on, just didn't get around to asking the question, do you see containers eventually replacing VMs one day?
So there's a lot of great cases to be made for containers. For whether they'll completely replace VMs, that would be like, I don't know, Netflix completely replacing TV. Just because it's newer doesn't mean there isn't some, uses and aspects that are important to the people that do still watch TV or still use VMs. However, containers do provide a much more, I believe, agile experience for development. They allow you to run things, whereas VMs, they might be, you might be able to make basically what I would say when you get into very complex scenarios, there are times when VMs aren't as reproducible and easy to maintain as containers. So there are times when that VM is downloading certain things or being created in a way that isn't quite frozen in time, the way that a container is frozen in time. And this might lead to downstream problems, downstream errors, and there's nothing that's more costly than a mistake or a break. And so containers really allow us to have less headaches because we freeze every dependency at a version if we want to, or at dot latest if you want to maintain the newest version of a very stable product, like say Redis :latest is very stable. But there's I can't say one's ever going to work over the other. I just believe that with containers, the developer experience is very agile, much easier to develop in. For me, especially getting started, I don't have to learn how to work with VMs. I can just right click, demo app, right click, add a Docker. This is so frozen because my computer is slow. But add Docker support, and I'm on my way. And there's a lot of documentation behind it, backing it in various languages that makes someone successful. Whereas VMs is a product by product basis. There's obviously going to be great documentation on it. Personally, I just would go with containers, and I'm so biased. So biased.
Well, I'm excited to see where we go from here because, yeah, I used to think containers were a bit of a beast to figure out how to implement successfully and get to run well. So seeing all the support in Visual Studio to help alleviate some of that stress is great. And I can't wait to see what it's going to be moving forward. So thank you so much, Uche. And thank you so much, Robbie. I'm going to add you back on real quick.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering all the questions in the chat. And if you have any other questions, chat, feel free to reach out to any of us and also go to the developer community to share any feature requests that you have in order to make Docker support even better than it already is.
Yep. And I also want to make sure I mention for the future of container tools, and what we're going to do, the best answer to that question is whatever y'all ask. So truly, it's about the developer community feedback being posted. Email me at uche.nkadi@microsoft.com, NKADI @microsoft.com. I'm so open to whatever. We've gotten so many awesome ideas over the years, and it's really y'all shape how this changes, including VS Code Docker extension, as well as VS Container Tools. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah, and thanks for coming, you two. So until next time, everyone get to using those Docker containers in Visual Studio. And until next time, happy coding.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.